Hello and welcome to my channel In Search of Wonder. My name is Anne and today I'm going to attempt to rank Jane Austen's novels. Today I'm drinking my coffee out of my Obstinate Headstrong Girl mug, which my husband designed and you can find on my Etsy shop. I love the cameo on this side of the mug. Love this mug. So here is the spot on my shelf where my annotated Jane Austens live. This year, as you know, we have been celebrating Jane Austen's 250th birthday, and it's been so much fun with Charlene at Coffee and a Book as we have been reading all of Jane Austen's major novels, as well as some books that we know inspired Jane Austen in her writing, and books that have elements of her plots that she maybe got inspiration from, or characters or titles, that sort of thing. That has been so much fun. And reading all of her novels back to back has really given me the opportunity to compare and to contrast them and to decide how I feel about them, about each one in particular. However, that being said, this is by no means a definitive and permanent ranking for all time. While my feelings about each of these Austen novels have stayed pretty consistent over the multiple times that I've read them, there is some fluctuation there. Sometimes on a rereading of one of them, I appreciate it more, and sometimes it maybe falls a little bit in my estimation in the ranking of Austen novels. So there's some change, and sometimes I look back on them and I think, oh, that one is really my favorite one. And then other times I'm like, nope, it's definitely that one. So it kind of fluctuates a little bit. It's not a permanent feeling. Like on any given day, it might be slightly different. But this general ranking, pretty consistent. There's kind of like groupings, like 3 different groupings of Jane Austen's novels is where I think them, like in groups. And then within those groups, they kind of shift a little bit back and forth depending on my current feelings at the moment. Also, I think it should be said that even Jane Austen's worst, in my estimation, it's not actually her worst, but in my personal appreciation of it, even the ones that I appreciate the least are still better than almost any other book. And I still consider her writing, even in the books that are not my favorites, I consider her writing to be probably the best that's out there. It's just amazing writing. And every time I read her book, even if there's something about the storyline that I don't like or the characters or whatever that I don't jive with at the time, even then, the writing is just amazing and I love it. Definitely, by far, one of the most talented and gifted authors in the English language that has ever existed. Before we get started, I should warn you, there will be spoilers. So if you haven't read Austen's novels and you don't want to be spoiled about them, then please pause and come back to this video when you've read all of them and want to hear the rankings for yourself. I definitely am going to be spoiling these books for you. So let's begin with the bottom third. The 2 books that are in the third grouping that on any given day, one or the other of them might be my least favorite. Sometimes I prefer one over the other, etc. Let's start with one that usually finds itself at the bottom of the Jane Austen stack, and that is Mansfield Park. Now, Mansfield Park is a bit of a chunker. And also, there are some drawbacks that, in my opinion, keep it from being as engaging and absorbing as some of her other books. And that's really the only reason that it's not my favorite. I like the character of Fanny, and unlike many other people, I like the character of Edmund. I think he's a very normal guy. He's not a paragon. Now, he is a man of virtue. He's a good man, so you can't dislike him for that reason, but he gets distracted by a pretty face and a charming personality, which is so, as Susan in an Anne of Green Gables series would say, just like a man. I mean, very typical male behavior, let's be honest, okay? So Austen was, her strength is she draws from life. And in Edmund's character, that's not any different. So many people don't like that. They want Edmund to be a better version of himself, but he's a real man, and this is a real story. So I don't take issue with that. I don't have a problem with that. I don't think it makes him a mean or a nasty person. I think it makes him a man who has to learn lessons the hard way, just like all of us. And he does learn his lesson, and it's a hard lesson for him. It's not easy. And I think sometimes because we don't spend as much time with the male characters in Austen's books as we do with the female characters definitely 100% the focus of the story. I think we don't maybe get the full character arc. It's hinted at and we see glimpses of it, but there's not as much full development as there is with a female. So Edmund has his own development arc. It's just not as obvious, and we're not taken on that journey as much as we are with Fanny. And so that is a bit of a drawback. The other thing I dislike is I like how everything wraps up in the end. I like how everything is resolved, and I like the solutions where Jane Austen puts each character and the people that she puts them with. I think I like that. Other people disagree with the pairings and the groupings that end up at the end of the story. I actually think that's the story she was telling, and it's a perfect resolution to everything. However, I wish we had a little bit more time in that resolution. I wish that instead of just being told that certain things happened in the very last chapter, even though this book is already long to begin with, I think it should have been at least one more chapter with a more intimate glimpse at the goings on, both in the hearts and minds of our main characters, but also in physically, like what they did and what they said to one another. It's very much rushed through and glossed over, and that I think is the biggest detrimental factor in this book. If Austen had taken the time, even though the book is already long, if she had taken the time to really invest in that ending and the resolution of those various storylines, I think it would have risen up personally in my estimation a little bit. But as it is, I'm always left just a little bit disappointed after the last chapter at the way we rushed through everything. And, you really have to use your imagination to come up with, idealized scenes of how everything gets wrapped up in the ending. It's a lot is left to the imagination, not a lot is spelled out. So Mansfield Park is going to go at the bottom of the stack. It's still a great book though, Jane. I still like it. I've read it 3 times. I'll read it again. And then we have Northanger Abbey, which once again, great book. I really enjoy this book. I would read it again. There are a lot of things that I love about this book, but it is very different from Jane Austen's other novels. It is much more YA for one thing. Our character, Catherine, and this I think is another element of what makes Jane Austen so amazing, is that she writes a young girl very convincingly in this story, very convincingly. And that's why there's a strong YA feel, because there's a lot of YA elements to this story. And it stands to reason because it's one of the first books Austen actually wrote, even though it wasn't published first. It was one of the last books published. The last book published, I think. But it was still written earlier in her life when she was younger, and that makes sense. It really has that feel to it. So I'm not a big YA fan, and that's really the only drawback for me about this one. I find it funny, I find it insightful, I find Jane Austen's storytelling to be just absolutely delightful in here. I love the antics and the things that Catherine gets up to in this story, and the misunderstandings and all of the things that happen. It's a great story, and it's a great novel of friendship and betrayal and things like that. But it has a very strong YA feel, and YA is not my favorite genre on any day, so that's why it's probably not my most favorite Austen novel, even though I really do enjoy it. So this is the other book that goes in the bottom 3 of Austen's novels. Now, the next grouping, I have two in the next grouping as well. And to be honest, when I read them, I love them. I have on some readings given them 5 stars. I've on some readings given them 4 stars, but I've always loved them. And I've thoroughly enjoyed Austen's storytelling, her character development, the subtlety of her storytelling. I've just really loved them. So even though they're in the middle of the stack and they're not my most favorite Austen novels, they're still ranked in my most favorite books of all time that I still really love and admire as excellent examples of English novels. So let's start with this one, Sense and Sensibility, which is another one of the longer ones. And this one goes up and down a little bit every time I read it. This past time I read it, I really loved it. And I made a whole video about this with my analysis of it as I was reading through it and things that I had never seen before, connections I made that I had never made before on any other reading of it. And I just went a lot deeper with it this time around than I ever had before. And I gained a really strong appreciation for it. So honestly, this one I would place maybe a little bit higher than the other one I'm going to put in this grouping that I'll tell you about in a minute on this reading. But previously, it was one of my least favorite novels. So that's why I'm introducing it now in the ranking, because over time in my relationship with Austen and her books and everything, this is where this one would rank. But currently at the moment, it's pretty equal with the other book that I'm going to show you, at least. I really, really loved it this last time I read it. Even though it is the most didactic and almost moralistic of Austen's writings, of her novels, this is the one where Mansfield Park, she had a point that she was making and that she was exploring, the point of virtue versus vice. And this one, it's in the title, Sense and Sensibility. She was comparing and contrasting these two ideas that were popular in her culture at the time, philosophical ideas that people were debating in art and philosophy. And she was exploring it in a literary format. And she was definitely very intentional about creating characters that reflected these different aspects. The things that happen in the story are examining the idea of sense versus sensibility, and the dialogue in the book brings it up frequently or illustrates various aspects of these philosophies. So she's very heavily thematic in this story, more so than in some of her other books. And normally that would be a huge drawback for me. And that may be why the first couple of times I read it, I didn't appreciate it as much as her other books, besides the fact that it is longer and it does take a while for the story to really develop. You have to stick with this one until about halfway through or so. And then, it starts to pick up a little bit and you're like, oh, okay, we're going somewhere with this story. And there's like very dramatic things that happen at a certain point, but it does move pretty slow initially. So those are the reasons why it wasn't always a favorite of mine. But this last reading, just really, I went a lot deeper in it and appreciated so much more about it and really began to just love the characters so much. Eleanor and Marianne and Edward Ferrars. Yes, I even really liked him. We don't get as much of Colonel Brandon as maybe I would like, because he ends up with Marianne at the end of the story. I would like to have more time spent with him. We just get some glimpses of him throughout the story, enough to know that he's a really good guy, but not to really know him as a person. So I would love to spend more time with him in the story, but otherwise, I really love this story. I love the exploration of sisterhood, which is a lesser theme in this story, but she really, really, really examines sister relationships, not just with Eleanor and Marianne. There are multiple sister relationships in this story, and it is fascinating to see the different types of relationships between the different kinds of sisters in different kinds of social status and different kinds of family culture, and seeing how the sister relationship is portrayed in those different situations. Very interesting. And since I have a lot of sisters myself, that just really caught my attention this time around. So I really loved Sense and Sensibility. This was a great book. I thoroughly enjoyed my reading of it this year, more than I ever have before. So we're halfway through her major novels. The other one that goes in that grouping with Sense and Sensibility is Persuasion. Now, Persuasion, I read this a couple months ago and I just loved it. It was one of those where you get to the end and you're just like, and the book sticks with you for a while. And shortly after I finished reading it, I went and saw a play version of it. That was wonderful to see it brought to life on the stage, the things that I had just read, and to have it, yeah, just come to life in front of me was fantastic. And the play, they did a really, really good job of sticking to Jane Austen's story and really just illustrating it with drama. It was very well done. And it was like the cherry on top. It was fantastic. The book itself, I mean, wonderful. I loved it so much. And I love how we read Persuasion and then we read Northanger Abbey, and Persuasion was written later in Austen's life when she was a fully grown, mature woman and she had experienced a great deal of heartache and difficulties and struggles, and she no longer has that girlish view of life. And it's very evident in the heroine in this story, contrasted with Catherine Morland, who in Northanger Abbey, who is at the beginning of her life, of her adult life, and she's naive and she's innocent and she's young and she has no angst. She's just full of joy and hope for the future. Whereas Anne has been knocked around a little bit, and so she still is steady, peaceful, calm, even joyful, but she's been tempered by pain and suffering and frustration and difficulty. And so she's a stronger, more mature person. And that just permeates this novel, and I think is maybe why it's more appealing to me where I am in my life now, the age that I am. Just really beautifully well done. And this one, more so than any of the other books, Jane Austen's deft touch with her characters and with the way she's weaving the story and the small scenes that she uses, but that are just packed full with emotional weight. It's just incredible. Like there's these small scenes, but they carry huge significance in the story. And I don't know any other author that does that quite as well as Austen. And I feel like she's at her best with that in this book. I love it. This great book. Like I'm saying, there's still a couple more books to go, but this is amazing. I love this one. So even though it's not at the top of the stack, still a big favorite of mine. So the top two books on any given day, either one could be my favorite. I'm going to stick with one as my favorite. It's mostly arbitrary. So yeah, I hesitate to say this is my top one. Honestly, any of these four, the top two groupings could be my favorite on a given day. But we're gonna go with Emma next. Look at this, chunker. It's a big book, but it's amazing. I love Emma. Now, not everybody loves the character of Emma, but she grows significantly in this book, and you are not supposed to like her in the beginning of the story. If you like who she is at the beginning of the story, then you're not reading it right. So you're not supposed to like her. However, you are supposed to see how she grows and changes. The Emma at the end of the story, while she has the same personality and she has the same character and she's dealing with the same flaws, she has grown, she has matured, she has learned really hard lessons, and she's learned them by being humbled, which is how all of us learn lessons. This I feel like is a masterclass in character development, in a character arc, of taking a person, like a normal person with normal everyday flaws. Emma is not a villain. She's not a terrible person. She's just a flawed, spoiled person. And she grows and matures through the humbling events that she experiences, mostly at her own hand because of her own fault and her own stupidity. And she learns from them, though. Those experiences humble, she thinks to them. There are multiple chapters devoted to us walking with Emma through her agonizing mental, emotional process of development, where she recognizes the harm that she has done, the mistakes that she has made. She sees herself in a mirror, and layer after layer gets revealed, and she realizes how she needs to change. And she does takes steps to improve. She apologizes to the people she needs to apologize to. She learns from her mistakes and makes better choices the next time around. And in the end, it ends happily for her. So I love that. I love the character development in this story. It's some of the best character development that exists in English literature. And I just love Emma. Even at her worst, towards the beginning of the story, there is a lot to love in her. If there wasn't, then it wouldn't be as good of a story. But there is goodness in Emma, even from the very beginning of the story. And so you can enjoy her even while you see her foibles and her flaws. You can enjoy her and see how she grows and changes, and you root for her throughout the story. And I also, Mr. Knightley, can we just for a moment appreciate Mr. Knightley? Some days I prefer him to Mr. Darcy. Kind of depends on my mood. But yeah, Mr. Knightley I like Mr. Knightley a lot. That's Emma. Very near the top, if not the top. And then, of course, Pride and Prejudice. And this is a classic for good reason. This one, I mean, they're all classics, but this one is, when people talk about Jane Austen, this is the first book that's mentioned because this, in most people's estimation, rises up a little bit above the rest of her other books. It is just a great story. It has everything. It has the realistic characters that Austen is known for. It has her subtle humor and her irony laced throughout. It has a fantastic storyline with amazing characters and great character development. It's everything. It's everything all in one package. There's humor and there is drama and there is a little bit of sadness, but not enough to make it heavy at all. There's nothing heavy here at all, 100%. It's just a delightful, fun, engaging read, and there's good reason for it to have been adapted many times in many different ways because it's just a great story. It's a great story. And Lizzie and Mr. Darcy are fantastic characters. They're characters that you feel like you know them. Like when you read this story, you feel like you really get to know Lizzie and Mr. Darcy. Not even that you know people like them, because that could be true too. And that happens a lot when you read a book. You're like, oh, I know somebody with those, that feels very familiar because I know someone like that. You feel like you know Lizzie and Mr. Darcy when you're finished reading this book. You feel like they're real people. And that, I think, is one of Austen's most brilliant aspects, that you feel like you can know these people that she's created out of her imagination, and she's made them so real to you. You feel like you could, invite them over to tea one day and they would come and you could talk with them. So anyway, I love Lizzie and I love Mr. Darcy and I love this whole story. And so, on any given day, it might be number one. So we're going to put it on the number one. And I want to make an honorable mention. Many people don't realize that Jane Austen also wrote a novella, Lady Susan. And this novella is in epistolary format. So it's written with letters all the way through. I apologize, the afternoon sun is like coming straight through this window and creating this highlight here. So sorry, the lighting isn't great. But anyway, this novella is just fantastic. Also, it's completely different from everything else Jane Austen wrote. I feel like Northanger Abbey is very different from her other novels, and Mansfield Park a little bit as well, but Lady Susan is completely unlike any of them. First of all, it's epistolary, which was the writing style that Austen started in, but then when she went to rework Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility to be published, she actually switched from the epistolary format to the omniscient overview point of view that she wrote all the rest of her books. And so she reworked them. She kept some of the letters. Some of them are quite famous, but she took it out of the epistolary format. So Lady Susan, however, she never went and reworked. So it's in her original epistolary format. She did, at the very end, tie up all the loose threads of the story with some brief third-person narrative that just ties all the knots at the end and leaves everything in a nice, neat package. But the bulk of the story is told with letters. And it's brilliant. It's brilliantly done. Because, again, you feel like you know these people. Even though you're only meeting them through letters, you know them. And Lady Susan in particular is one of the most interesting characters created in the history of the English novel. And for that reason alone, you should read it. Some people absolutely hate her, and you are supposed to. You're not supposed to love this woman. Some people do admire her, which I find concerning. There is nothing to admire in this woman. So if you admire her, you probably also admire Satan in Paradise Lost. And you need to check your heart. But anyways, Lady Susan is a terrible person. One is not meant to admire her, but one is meant to appreciate the fact that women like her exist. And also one is meant to laugh at her and find her highly amusing. And yeah, it's very incredibly well done. If you can get past the fact that the heroine of the story is really an anti-heroine and not someone that, you know, we should be trying to emulate in our life at all. If you can get past that, if you just like a funny story and if you like a epistolary style, read this one. It won't take long. It's a short book. It's, you know, novella length. I read it in January of this year. Well, like over Christmas break, so end of December into January, and loved it so much. It was such a great read. So that's an honorary mention. It doesn't really necessarily go with the rest, and I don't know where to put it. I wouldn't put it at the top. I probably would put it maybe somewhere between the top 4 and the bottom 2, just because it's novella length and it doesn't have the full-fledged story that the others have, but it's still incredibly enjoyable. And I'm definitely going to be reading this again. That is my ranking of Austen novels. I'm curious where you would rank each of them if you've read them all. Please let me know in the comments what your ranking would be, or at the very least, what you would put at the top and what you would put at the bottom of your stack, if you can at least tell me that much. Or if they're all your favorites on any given day, that's fine. You can let me know that too, because I understand that perfectly. So there is my Jane Austen ranking. I just want to thank everybody for joining me and Charlene on this journey of celebrating Jane Austen in her 250th year. It has been so much fun reading the books by her and the books that inspired her, and I hope that everyone has a much greater appreciation for Austen and her body of work now than you ever did before. And let me know in the comments what you think about my Austen rankings, and I will chat with you there, and I will see you next time.